You probably haven't noticed this, but not only can Ciaccona pull in the enemies, she can also pull in your astrites. I mean, gotta make a living as a singer somehow, right? Anyway, in this complete guide video, I am going to showcase Ciaccona's abilities, explain what's the best way to build her, or help you decide if she's worth pulling for. Just a reminder, the footage you're watching is from a test server, so the final content and Ciaccona stats are subject to change. Alright, so this part is actually pretty unique because initially you would assume she's just a glorified support for a future unit. However, there's a lot of cool things that Ciaccona can do. I mean, sure, she's absolutely amazing at powering up and enabling arrow erosion, which is a special damage over time debuff. But besides that, she can also group enemies, boost arrow damage by a significant amount, and she's even great in certain non-arrow teams. Best of all, you can even organize her very own concerts. But yeah, let's go back to the basics, quite literally. Her normal attack is a 4-hit combo, and the last 4th hit is going to be super important when it comes to fully utilizing her kit because it will apply arrow erosion debuff, generate 140 bar, and most important of all, summon this ensemble Sylph. And as long as this is active on the field, everyone's arrow damage is increased by 24%. Don't worry, this performer sticks around for a long time, and you can even have 2 of them. However, the arrow damage bonus does not stack. Now, here's the cool part. You can actually spam her basic 4 thanks to those Sylphs she summons. By using this really simple dash cancel, all you have to do is dash backwards sometime during basic 4. I like to practice when the camera just starts to tilt, but you can even do it faster. And as you can see, this resets the combo back to basic 3, and you just keep spamming these Sylphs, and it's then super easy to quickly build up her 40 to the max. There's also the other option of doing her mid-air attacks, which you can then follow up with basic 4, which also can be dash cancelled for faster execution. Oh, and if you forgot already, she is a pistol user, so you can use these aim shots for world exploration, I guess. Now, when it comes to the resonance skill, it's quite simple. It deals small amount of damage and applies 1 stack of erosion. On top of that, you can immediately follow up with basic 2 afterwards, although more importantly, if you interrupt any part of her basic combo with the skill, she'll actually immediately generate the Sylph, which can be useful in some cases to quickly gain the arrow damage bonus. But yeah, for the most part, the skill is there to help with generating concerto energy. Moving over, we have the Forte skill, and quite frankly, I am thankful that Wuba devs this time didn't cram a wall of text. And the Forte is extremely simple. There's 3 bars. Once you have all 3 of them, hold down the attack to generate this vortex, which will pull in enemies, generate a lot of concerto, and apply 1 erosion. And to build up the Forte, there's only 2 ways, with the final basic attack 4 and intro skill. That's it. Oh, and thanks to the second inherent skill, it will deal more damage. But yeah, moving over to the intro, it deals damage, applies erosion debuff, generates 140 bar as I just said, and then you can just immediately start off from basic 3 attack, so it'll always be useful to capitalize on this. Finally, the coolest part of her kit, Resonance Liberation. First of all, it's got a pretty beefy multiplier, so usually it will hit for some good damage. But then, get this, she actually starts to sync together with the Sylphs, and there's even a small rhythm minigame you can do. By default, as she keeps singing, enemies will be damaged and receive erosion debuff. However, she can also apply Spectrofrazzle instead of erosion by hitting this side of the minigame with a specified button. And yeah, as you've guessed it, once you swap out, she will keep on singing. The range of the debuff application is pretty decent as I've tested. Usually, at least in Tower of Adversity, I never had problems with enemies moving out of range, although if you do switch back to Ciaccona for any reason, she will immediately end the Liberation. But basically, the Liberation is the main way to apply a lot of Spectrofrazzle or erosion debuffs. Oh, and thanks to the first inherent skill, after casting the Liberation, she will gain a shield. Now, the last thing we need to talk about would be her rotations. Assuming you start off with the intro, perform basic 3 and if possible, dash cancel out of basic 4, to then repeat this once more and pull off the second basic 4. Afterwards, use the skill, which can help cancel basic 4, and then just use her Forte into Liberation and then swap out. Of course, you could also use the Echo in any part of this rotation. However, keep in mind, if you need her to apply Spectrofrazzle, you'll have to wait until you can trigger that button from the mini rhythm game, so it's usually like a second or 2, but then you can swap out. Regardless, this is just a boilerplate rotation. The situation can always be different, and you can also weave in some swap cancels if needed. Anyway, let's move to the Bard's build section. Like always, I like to start off my build section with some overall damage overview with recommended abilities leveling priority. And interestingly enough, Ciaccona's damage is all over the place, and by that I mean her damage types. So usually attack and arrow damage bonuses will be king, or should I say queen here. So looking at her weapon options, no surprises here. Signature is an absolute powerhouse, gives her a nice 12% attack increase, but also increases her arrow damage by 24% after she applies erosion, plus it also reduces enemies' arrow resistance by 10%, which is going to be amazing for Arrow teams. But moving over, there's also Last Dance. It already falls off by about 16 to 18% compared to her signature, but nevertheless, it's quite good if Carlotta won't mind you stealing those pistols from her. And then there's the good old Static Mist. What can I say? Those who use pistol units know how OG this weapon is, and it still remains great even to this day. But obviously not as good as her signature, and sometimes even slightly weaker than Carlotta's pistols. Then, as for 4-star options, surprisingly enough, the craftable weapon Romance and Farewell is actually quite nice since Ciaccona will be constantly applying erosion. Even if it is about 25 to 30% weaker, it's still a good alternative if you're saving up for the signature. Finally, there's Nova Burst, and it's the weakest of the bunch, but still relevant enough to receive a mention, since if you do those dash cancels for basic 4, it can quickly build up the passive effect. Now, what if I told you her best echo set has to do with Arrow? You'd probably call me a madman. I know, shocking. Anyway, so her best in slot echo set is going to be Gusts of Welkin, since it gives 10% arrow damage boost from the 2 set, and then the 5 set bonus will increase everyone's arrow damage by 15% after triggering erosion, and 15% more for the wielder of this set. If that's not enough, the active echo called Fleur de Lis will give additional 10% arrow damage boost. However, if you use her in non-arrow teams, as always, I recommend then to go with Moonlit Set and Heron as the active echo, but you probably knew that already. Now, as for the loadout, nothing surprising here. 4 cost echoes main stat should be critical rate or damage, while 1 costs need to be attack percent. But interestingly enough, while double arrow on 3 cost is the best personal potential she can achieve, sometimes it's possible she might not have enough energy ready to cast Liberation, which is really important. So it's also fine if you have trouble with that to go with the 3 cost that has energy in the main stat. Other than that, if you can get double arrow, one of them being attack percent is fine. Finally, as for the substats, critical rate and critical damage first to focus on, then attack percent and energy regen is the way to go. And regarding energy requirements, it can be as low as 105% to as high as 135% if you're using her in GN teams. But it's always best to test out her rotations if possible to see what energy number is the best fit. I'm pretty sure 99% of you watching this are also aware that Ciaccona's team comps are not complete yet. I mean, just looking at her outro, it amplifies erosion damage by 100%, which is nuts. But there's no good way to utilize this yet. And while waiting for that special someone to come and claim this powerful outro, let's look at the current situation. And right now, I'd say this GN team comp is a less competitive option than going with the usual comp of Martefi and Verena or Shorekeeper. However, you could use them together here with either Air Rover, Verena, or Shorekeeper as the last option. Not gonna lie, this team is super fun to mess around with, especially for the fact I get to dust off GN who's been sitting in the corner. So overall, this is a pretty great team to play around with. However, outside the realms of Arrow, we've also got Spectro. That's right, you can use her together with Phoebe and the usual healer option, or even go with Zani instead of Phoebe. But keep in mind, Zani still works much better with Phoebe than with Ciaccona. Although, if you didn't pull for Zani and want to provide a good source of Spectral Frazzle for DPS Phoebe, this is a nice solution. Just keep in mind, if you want to fully maximize Phoebe's damage, it's best to use Moonlit Set on Ciaccona. But yeah, at the end of the day, Ciaccona is still waiting for that DPS who can utilize her insane erosion application, so please keep that in mind. Let's talk about the serious stuff now. If you've decided to become a patron of this musician, how should you pamper her? Well, Sequence 1 is a nice quality of life if you suck like me at dodging, which helps her gain immunity when the skill is casted. Plus, she will now also gain a bunch of attack after using basic attacks. Then, Sequence 2 is where the big money is at. Casting the Liberation will now grant 40% arrow damage bonus for the whole team, so big arrow damage boost for all. Now, Sequence 3 will help shorten the rotations. Basically, now it's just enough to do her intro and skill to get all 3 bars, which is nice. And then Sequence 4 is also nice. Both her Forte and Liberation will ignore a certain amount of the enemy's defense. And then S5 boosts her Liberation damage even more, but then also, while it's active, everyone takes less damage. And then finally, S6 will allow her to sort of become a main DPS, more or less, due to the way it works. I mean, at this point, you're playing a different game than me, buddy. But yeah, overall, I'd say focus on obtaining her signature first, then go for S2 if possible. Obviously, she's still fine without these upgrades, but getting at least the signature will bump up both her personal and team's damage by quite a lot. Anyway, that's pretty much it when it comes to this Bard girl. I would appreciate it if you could press the like button and subscribe to this channel, because I have a feeling I need to show Ciaccona I'm also a superstar so she would start talking to me. What?